Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Split, a young adult book review podcast for readers and writers. I'm Bryan Cohen, the author of the TED Saves the World series, and that's Robert Scanlon, the author of the Dreamer Chronicles. How are you doing on this fine late afternoon for me, early morning for you?
It's early morning the very next day in Australia, Bryan, and I can tell you this day is promising to be very good. You've got a lot of nice things to look forward to. It's sunny and warm. Let's hope it's like that for you in Chicago, huh?
Nice. Oh, I'm sure it will be. I know it was 13 degrees Fahrenheit here yesterday when I left the house. So, but hey, if it's looking like Australia weather tomorrow, I'll take it. So today's book that we're going to review and talk about is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. This book is really something else. There really isn't much like it out there, and we're going to have a lot of fun talking about it. But before we talk about it, I want to describe the book if you haven't read it or if you haven't read it in a while. Ready Player One follows Wade Watts, a teenager and geek extraordinaire, as he tries to solve a mystery left by a deceased and eccentric billionaire before an evil corporation can win the spoils. Wade and most of the world spend most of their time inside the Oasis, a virtual utopia in which the contest is being held. When Wade is the first to make progress in the billion-dollar game, he'll make friends and foes who are willing to do anything to win the ultimate prize. So, yeah, I read this book twice, and both times I've been completely engrossed, probably as obsessed as Wade is with the Oasis. It's pure 80s nostalgia. That isn't to say you won't enjoy it if you weren't alive in the 80s or if you're a super geek, but it certainly helps. What do you think about Ready Player One?
Wow, it was unbelievably detailed. And as you say, I mean, it's definitely written for people with a fondness for both the 80s culture and video games, quite obviously, and probably even Dungeons and Dragons and those who love mythical fantasy type role-playing games, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. The only similarity I could find was maybe Snow Crash. Have you read that? Neil Stephenson?
Oh, no. No, I haven't.
Yeah, it has some similarities. There's a lot of action within a virtual world there, but there's also a lot of action outside of it. I love the utopian, dystopian play, you know, the fact that the utopia is inside, and if you're kind of wealthy, you can equip your virtual utopia even more effectively. But I was the same as you, Bryan. You know, I just couldn't wait to get back to it every time when I had some space for reading. I was really looking forward to picking up on the story. Even though there were some parts of it that I found were dragged for me, they were still compelling me to go back.
Yeah, and speaking of the dragging, that I think that was the over-detailed parts, probably the parts where he goes so in-depth. There's hundreds of 80s references in even probably in single sections, and that definitely can slow down the pace a little bit. But I think that the references wouldn't have nearly have been as successful if the characters weren't fun to spend time with. I loved Artemis. I loved H and the brothers, the Japanese brothers. They're also fun. Wade is fun as well, but he's definitely kind of like the everyman in this scenario. But man, it's just fun to see all those people, and when they all kind of come together at the end, you just really get to see the interplay of everybody. And you learn some new things about the characters by seeing them in real life, and you feel like you know them so well, and then you get this other layer, and that's just so fun. And I think the scariest thing about this book, I mean, dystopias are all a little bit scary. This is probably one of the most believable dystopias I've ever read, because several million people are already kind of in the same boat as the Oasis, and when Wade infiltrates IOI and sees all the indentured servants in there, it's kind of it makes you think that this could very well happen to us.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, it's set in what 2040 something.
44,
Yeah,
2044, I think.
which seems like a long way off, but you're right. There are so many echoes of our current situation. It's highly resonant. You can really identify with the things that they're facing, and the detail is just absolutely brilliant and clever too. A story that's set in the future, but requires them to kind of relive the 80s because of the guy that created the virtual world, was in love with the 80s. So I thought that was fantastic.
And obviously, Ernest Cline is Halliday. I mean, he's kind of speaking through his own, wants everyone to be obsessed with what he's obsessed with. It's very brilliant. You're definitely right. He did a smart thing with creating the story the way he did, for sure. So as a writer, I mean, if people have ever said your books aren't detailed enough, read this book to find out what detail is. I've never seen any book go so deep. I mean, it didn't even have just one world to describe. There are two separate, very different worlds to describe, and he goes into huge depth with all of them. What do you think as a writer that something you should get out of this one?
Well, for me, definitely, it's about sort of looking at the things that you know really well yourself and not underestimating the power that they can bring to your writing. And it's that old-fashioned phrase, you should write what you know, which, I would always challenge because, if you want to write a murder mystery, then that gets a bit embarrassing. but the personal experience clearly that Ernest Cline has had. And what amazed me is being brave enough and bold enough to write that level of detail, knowing full well that there is a world full of geeks out there that are just going to go and pick his story to bits and say, no, that didn't happen in 1981. That was only a number 14 in the charts in 1982. So it's definitely it's a book for trivia fans, that's for sure. So if you've got areas of your life where you've got great trivia to draw on, have a think about how that could come to life as a character even, really, because I think, Cline made the entire world, the virtual world at least, a real character in and of itself.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. And the other thing is, I think, you hear that phrase, show, don't tell. This book has a lot of tell. There's a lot of tell because there's so much description, and it works. And I think it goes to show that the rules, the so-called rules of fiction, they don't always apply, particularly if you create strong work. You don't need to follow the rules. The rules are kind of set up as just guidelines to help you get started in fiction. You shouldn't tell 100%. You shouldn't show 100%. It's about a balance. And this isn't a 50-50 balance in this book for sure, but the things that he's telling are so rich and so connected with the story that it makes sense to tell. And I've heard people that are against the whole show, don't tell thing say, I'm a storyteller, not a story shower. And Ernest Cline in this book is definitely a storyteller for sure.
Yes, there's no question about that. The vivid descriptions, and for me, the difference between when you should show and when you should tell, or when telling is more appropriate, is in bringing vivid description to life. I think whenever a character is doing something, that's when you show, and I think Cline actually does both really, really well, because one of the things I loved was the snappy dialogue that really revealed the emotions of the characters when they were interacting. And they were my favourite scenes when Wade was interacting with others. Whenever he was on his own and just playing a video game, it was really, really detailed and descriptive, and it was kind of pacey, but get me to the next scene where there's a battle. That's what I wanted.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
But I agree. The vividness of this description, and you could really argue also that even the greats like Tolkien and Lord of the Rings, there are acres and acres of narrative in there that's just descriptive exposition, and yet people love it.
Yeah, I totally agree. So takeaways. I've got a takeaway. You can have one or two takeaways. We'll decide after my takeaway.
Yep.
I think my one takeaway is if you go deep with a time period, if you completely immerse yourself in that as a writer, I mean, you will get a lot of nerd cred. And Klein already had some cred because he's he director of Trekkies or wrote one of those Star Trek. I didn't do enough research, but he already had nerd cred, and he just sent it off into the stratosphere with this one. So if you are an expert in a certain time period, just go deep. If you're going to go in, go all the way, and we'll be talking about your book on here and all of your amazing detail.
Nice. Yeah, to be fair, this is his debut novel. And he's an accomplished screenwriter, obviously, but still to carry a debut novel off like this is staggeringly good, and one that I will return to fondly, as you have. My takeaway on this is that you would think that perhaps writing a thriller inside a virtual world might sound a little boring. And, done well with proper characters, with good description, with some excellent plot twists, it's as riveting as any story set in real life. So, don't be afraid to explore what you believe in for your story. It's all about the storytelling, as you said before.
Yeah. You can make any combination of genre and even virtual. I mean, there's so many more virtual kind of stories in the last few years, and it's just it's really fun, and you get engrossed in it because virtual worlds are becoming more and more part of reality. So my third takeaway for our dear listener or listeners, hopefully the latter, if you're obsessed with something, write a book about it, and you really put that out there earlier. You never know. There's probably thousands and thousands of people who are obsessed with the exact same thing. And when it's something as broad as an entire decade, I think people are really going to follow you. So if you love something, it's not about write what you know. It's about write what you love. If you find something you love, write about it, and it's gonna really play off of your strengths.
Couldn't agree more.
Cool. Hey, I have a prompt.
But before you do,
want to hear it?
I do want to hear it. Just before you do, I realised that something that we should have stated at the top of the show, which is the reading age for this book. It does have profanity and it does have sexual references. So for me, I would recommend probably 15 plus. People's opinions would vary, but it's not really a book for the younger reader, even though the story is great. So although a 12-year-old boy might be sucked in by, oh wow, it's all about video games and virtual reality, it does get pretty full on at times, and certainly doesn't hold any punches back. So for me, I don't know how you feel about that, but I think we should just make that clear.
No, good point. Definitely. I agree. All right. Prompt time. So, at its heart, Ready Player One is about obsessions. Create an obsession for your main character or your entire story population. What makes it so addictive, and how can you make sure that obsession is relatable for the audience?
Wow.
So do it. Write it in the comments.
I think you just
send us an email.
I think you've just given me an idea for book 4 of the Dreamer Chronicles. Thank you.
Good. You're welcome. That's why we're doing this. We want to inspire ourselves. We want to inspire others. So, of course. Happy to help, Robert. Cool. Well, this has been another episode of The Split, and you should subscribe to us. You should comment. You should check out our website, thesplitbookreviews.com. Am I right about that?
You are completely right about that.
Yes, we just got it, so I wasn't sure. Check us out there and keep on looking for our weekly reviews. Anything to add, Robert?
No, go read Ready Player One.
Yeah, please read it and give yourself a whole weekend because you're not going to be able to do anything else. All right, for Robert Scanlon, I'm Bryan Cohen. Have an awesome week and read a lot of books.
Ciao for now.
Thank you guys for watching. Somewhere on this page is a subscribe button to the Split channel. We do reviews every week. We would love it if you followed us every single week. Isn't that right, Robert?
That's exactly right. Follow us now. Hit the subscribe button.
Do it.